Hello.
Man, that was great. Great place to start with that discussion is what you heard from God last, right? The homework from last week. And one of the things that I took home from the homework last week was what areas of stress in our relationship really took us out from great stress. And I was sitting under last week, and I just took that question to God in prayer. What can I do for Athena when she's stressed to not create arguments out of that? And I was sitting on a rock out near our meadow with the PG&E lines, the power lines overhead, and I heard this give her a patient, gentle explanation. Patient, gentle explanation. And I looked up and I said, PGE. I can remember this. So I'm going to give her PGE.
Yes, and if you don't, you're going to get electrocuted. Just kidding.
Okay. Well, today we're going to be talking to you about something that's really near and dear to our hearts. We're writing a book about Athena. This is primarily Athena's message. She's going to do the bulk of the teaching today because there's a vision and insights that the Lord gives her. But it's an unforgettable image of three chairs, and we're going to lay it out for you. It's going to call us higher in all of our relationships. It's going to identify one of the enemy's main strategies for getting us to be combative with one another. To get us onto the same team with one another. And you're going to learn a practical way to combat that tendency that we have to get combative with one another. So I'm going to let Athena, share the bulk of this and just let her start off with her story on this.
Yes, so it's an honor to be here today, and we are going to uncover an enemy of our soul that weakens our prayers and actually blocks them. And our natural tendency to judge and accuse, and the strategies of how the enemy has been working. And we feel like this message is very unforgettable because we're going to be sharing it through an image of three chairs.
Yeah, and I forgot to mention here, this is our organization. We're late 2020. We started a nonprofit to do workshops to help people out with their core relationships. And, it's gone international this year, but I just want to point out, there's our website if you wanted to look up anything more on one of the materials we do. So back to you, sweetie.
All right. So,
I'm probably going to stand over here and manage the clicker.
All right, very good. So we're going to learn a practical way today about how to combat the natural tendency, as I mentioned, to judge and accuse, and become powerful advocates in our marriage and other relationships. This message isn't specific for marriage, it's really related to all relationships. But the core relationship is marriage, and if the enemy can keep us accusing and judging, even in our minds and hearts, then, it's going to spill out into all the other places, our home. But first, a bit about my story. By the way, there's notes that you can take, but you won't need them now as I tell my story, but then I'll prompt you when it's time to take notes. I grew up in a home where there was accusations and criticism. It was very common. Snap judgments about people, accusatory remarks behind their back. I remember saying goodbye to the guest, and my parents, they'd say goodbye, close the door, and then the fault finding began. All the remarks would start. I don't know if that was your household, that was mine. And sadly, maybe you can relate, sadly, I took this into my adulthood. My son asked me, hey Mom, what was it like being at Bible University where you got your schooling? What was my social life like is what he asked me. And I thought, well, kind of the weekends were a little bit boring, a little bit lonely, and I think it was because I was critical of my roommates and other students. So I think it kind of polarized my relationships. And that's probably a contributing factor as to why my social life wasn't that great. So, but on the flip side, I've had this ability to discern people and situations with very keen accuracy. And when this discernment is there, I'm like, hey, how do I know if I'm crossing over to judgmentalism? I don't know. How do I know if this is a gift from God or is it just me? And so these were it was kind of confusing for me. It was a little muddy. And I would say to God, how do I have this strong ability to just, walk in a room and size it up. But then I also have this quick ability to make conclusions about people's motives very fast. So when I was a young Christian, sometimes I would ask God, what is the difference between judging and discerning? And how will I know? Well, God answered it, and it permanently changed my life. It was through the image of 3 chairs. God knew what I needed to burn that answer into my heart and my mind forever. It started in 1997. I was visiting my brother and his wife up in Washington State, was staying for the weekend, and our lifestyles were very different. I was this on fire, Christian, missions-minded, frugal, and very truth-oriented. Well, let's just say we really couldn't relate that weekend. Life for them was all about the latest gadgets, wine-tasting socials, and luxury cruises. I think we have a slide for that. All right. Yep, there you go. And so, basically what was in my mind was, they are very worldly, and they need to get saved. They're selfish people. So I pointed out something to my sister-in-law that day. Their son was doing some misbehavior in the kitchen, grabbed something sharp, ran around with it. So I pointed it out to her. Yikes. That did not go well. I got a very strong reaction from my sister-in-law. She says, how dare you tell me how to parent? And then she went on and said, and I don't want your religion. What? I was taken back. I hadn't even talked about God that weekend. I didn't think they would be interested in the conversation. So why was she so strongly reacting to me and judging me? Tension was building that weekend, so I decided to take a walk outside. And as I went down their street, lo and behold, there was this forested pathway. Just what I needed so I could get a breather and vent. As I walked, God had another idea. He said, I want to show you something. At that moment, I kind of felt a little bit like, okay, there's something in my spirit telling me there's going to be an encounter here, like a road to Emmaus moment. He said, you know, she's acting like her father. I went, huh? Yes, her father the devil, but I want to be her father, so she'll act like me. There was no judgment from God at all. And I sensed something about it. I felt this conviction. And he proceeded to say, I want to show you 3 chairs. The first chair is the seat of the judge. It's where my verdicts are rendered, and it's the holy chair. And it's for me and me alone. And if you sit in this chair, you will reap my judgments. For there's only one lawgiver and one judge. And then I remembered, oh yeah, that's what it says in the book of James. He said, there's a second chair. This is where you rehearse an offense and brew over a matter. You're offended and you see the flaws in the other person. And you search for evidence to prove you're right. And in this chair, you tell me about the problem, and you may even pray that they will change. But all the while, you're accusing them. This is the seat of the accuser, and this is the seat of Satan. In this chair, your prayers are weak and powerless, and all I hear are your criticisms. When I heard that, my head dropped, and I started to tear up. I don't want to be like that. I was under conviction. How do I change, Lord? I think my sister-in-law is picking up on my judgment, even though I didn't even use words. He said, when you're willing to offer it up to me and release the right to judge and be critical and release your accusations, you can move to the third chair. This is the chair of the advocate. It's where Jesus sits. It's where you pray, my will be done on earth as it is in heaven. It's where you bring your requests and appeals to me, and you leave judgment in my hands. It's the seat of compassion and the place of revelation. And I will show you how to pray and what to do. He says, but Athena You are always sitting in one of these chairs at all times. I was literally speechless. My eyes were filled with tears. I knew that this conversation, this unexpected revelation, was somehow for my good. I had yet to learn how radically it was going to shift my paradigm about judging and reforming thinking. From that day forward, my attitude began to change. Yes, I was tempted to judge my brother and his wife, but I began to see with new eyes, and our relationship improved over time. When their boys graduated from high school, sadly, they divorced, and she moved to California. In 2011, 14 years after that encounter with God in the forest, she texted me and said, "You want to get together for coffee?" And we met. And in the conversation, she says to me, "Hey, I checked out a church." I said, "Really? What's the name of the church?" Get this. The Father's house. Where else? I almost leapt out of that chair. I didn't say anything about the experience I had in Washington. But where else would God have sent her? I love this image. It's a perfect image of the Father heart of God towards her, and that none would perish and all come to a saving knowledge of Him. Today we're going to learn the characteristics of these three chairs. We're going to look at examples of people in the Bible who were advocates and the impact it made. And we'll share steps of how to move from the judge and the accuser chair into the advocate chair next week. So this is part one. Next week will be part two of this talk. Normally, when we share this message, we do it all in one continuous time, but we're going to break it up. And then the third week, we're going to get into a deeper dive of these three chairs in marriage based on 1 Peter chapter 1 and 2. Next week, we will have a very moving time where you're going to interact with the chairs and be able to release accusing and judgmental thoughts. So make sure and come and be prepared for that. Our prayer is that you will see how vital it is to not partner with the accuser, but sit in the advocate chair for your loved ones, your marriage, and people all around you, our cities and our nations. God has so much to show us in the advocate chair, and today is about our vertical relationship with God and how it affects all our earthly relationships. Before I continue, I'd like us to take a few minutes, maybe about 8, to discuss. Can you go to the next slide? These questions. How can you tell when someone is personally judging you? Is it appropriate to judge another person, and if so, when, why? So, give time for everybody to share around your table, and then when you're done, I will call on some of you at the table to share some of your insights. Okay? Okay. This is a really good topic, and a big topic. But I would like to hear from this table. One person share. How can you tell when someone is personally judging you? Somebody from this table?
Sure, put you on the spot, huh? Wow.
The one who's laughing gets to share. Okay. You have somebody? Okay.
Yeah, my answer is not a good answer. We're really struggling on, there's some times where it's really obvious, but then there's other times where it's really hard because you may think you're being judged, but the person is just ADD or just focused on something else. And so, it's really, we didn't come up with anything that was perfect unless it's really overt.
Okay. Do you have something? All right. Okay, you're going to have to run because we want recorded. Ruth.
In the way that person look at you. When
Way they look at you?
they talk,
Body language.
Yeah, the way they're looking at you.
Did you have something? Okay, over here, Wendy. Over here. We're just staying with the first question.
Okay, so how do you tell if somebody is personally judging you? I think for me, at least on the recipient side, right, it is, my first reaction is, but you don't understand. Because you're judging me without knowing all the circumstances, how I feel.
Okay, that's the response. But how do you kind of tell?
We came to in the tone in which they're saying it. So when they're speaking, we hear that tone, oh, we know.
The tone. It's always the tone.
Alicia said it's a vibe.
Right? Yeah.
So she's talking to California East for the same.
Okay, one more for this. Okay, back there.
Yeah, unsolicited advice.
You guys are laughing like you know what that is.
Next question, is it appropriate to judge another person? If so, when and why? No hand raising, huh? Come
That's
on.
a tough question. Stumped you all. Except Alicia.
I think the only appropriate way is if they are, held to a higher standard. Then if they're not really meeting that, especially, Christians, then I think it's okay, like iron sharpens iron, to point out, hey, you're called to a higher standard and, this is where you're lacking and I can help you. I can join you in accountability for that.
Okay, so going on their standard that they accepted and holding it to it. Accountability. Yes, absolutely.
All right, anyone else? Come on, you guys had some conversations. Way in the back, we got two hands.
No, I was just going to say if they're going to hurt somebody. Yeah.
You gotta make sure your mic
They're
is
gonna hurt somebody.
hurt someone.
Yeah, they're gonna hurt
Okay.
somebody. Definitely an appropriate time to jump in.
There was one time where Christy and I were at a party and somebody saw us drinking alcohol and they're like, oh, well, what kind of Christian are you if you're drinking alcohol? You're like, kind of that kind of judgment. Like, and there's one thing to hold you to a higher standard, but when it's like an acquaintance or somebody you just kind of know to like make a comment like that, I felt a very judging statement.
Anyone else? All right, we got a hand over here.
Good thing I wore my running shoes today.
What we talk about in the table is it seems important to discern to know what's right and wrong. But in terms of judging, like if we are building up another person based on the discernment, it seems not good. But if you are building up, it's good. But if you are tearing down another person as a consequence, it seems not good.
Judgments that tear the person down. Yeah.
One more? Okay, one more hand. Here we go.
It's like a maze.
Do you think there's a difference between judging that person versus their actions? Yes. So I think that's the heart of the matter. Are you saying something to help them out of whatever sinful situation or action versus saying, I am up here and you are down there?
Yes.
So
Putting a
well
label on them, a negative label.
So true. So, next slide. I think this is a big topic. Would you agree? Yes, and a very appropriate topic. As you know, this is a popular gym in our area, and one night I stumbled across their motto in bold letters in a big banner. Look at that. Judge-free zone. I went, oh my God! gym and be judged by your appearance, right? We're not going to a social club to go put on makeup and get all dressed up and dolled up. No, I want to be able to go and not have somebody looking around me and seeing what I look like, right? And working out. So we're going to sell these banners at the end of the day. Want one for your home? But laughter aside, this is such a sensitive time in our culture, is it not? Like never before, we are a fractured nation. The very oxygen we breathe is filled with accusations and judgments. You just flip on the channel, the news, whatever you're watching, social media and talk shows, it's just covered with accusations and judgments. It's like filled. We are deeply divided. So I'm compelled to share this message with the body of Christ as it's needed more than ever before. Allow me to begin to go back to that early question that I would ask God. What is the difference between discernment and judgment? And that was brought up by some of you. Here's what I found on the definition of the word discernment, and this is where your handout comes in handy. And feel free to take photos of any of our slides, but we will be having this talk put on YouTube, Venture Marriage channel. So discernment, it is the ability to decipher between good and evil, and the process of making careful distinctions in our thinking about truth. And then the scripture says there's a gift of discernment, and that's the ability to see what is not evident to the average mind. It's also the ability to distinguish and select what is true, appropriate, and excellent. And discernment is the absence of judgment with view of obtaining spiritual guidance and insight. I found one of the best ways to help me understand discernment and judgment is with the water cycle. You see, the rain is like discernment, insight, revelation coming down from heaven to you. God wants this divine precipitation to go back to Him like prayer, like evaporation. Offering back your insights are done through appeals and intercession. But if that discernment doesn't move through us, it kind of looks like this. You see, toxic water that's sitting, stagnant water, it goes putrid and it's a breeding ground for disease. So it is with our discernment. God doesn't want us to hold on to it just to ponder and analyze. He wants us actually to take it back up in prayer. It's not to obsess on knowledge, but for the purpose of giving back prayer like evaporation. And if you do that, He will give you more rain, more discernment, more wisdom and insight, and it will flow back just like the water cycle. Something to consider doing when you watch social media or watch the news. It's so important to turn it back to prayer. I now have a habit of praying for these talk show hosts and leaders. I've been praying, people like Megan Kelly. I pray for her salvation right on the spot. And I just am starting to just build that muscle of prayer because it is so easy to listen and then judge. Listen and then accuse and adopt the very thing that you're hearing. So I encourage you, even if it's short prayer, pray it back to the Lord. Don't weapon against the enemy. And when you have that pure discernment, you'll be amazed to see what will overflow from you to others as well. I love Oswald Chambers. Do you guys remember that classical devotional called My Utmost for His Highest? He writes, discernment is God's call to intercession, never for fault finding. Write that one down. God's call to intercession. Discernment is God's call to intercession, never for fault finding. Now that we have a better understanding what discernment means,
let's take a look at the seat of the